It's a sad situation that in Scotland the people are totally unaware of their history. The vast majority have not been taught Scots history at all, and all they know is Wallace and Bruce via Holyrood. Perhaps they know about the clearances and the battle at Culloden, but most of us live in a bubble governed by the history of England and Empire, for those that are interested in history. So this video is for those people. This video explains that Scotland was a bright light in terms of political power. Then we were taken over through deceit and traitors by a foreign power and made a colony of that power. But the struggle to get our old constitution and our old rights back continue. So going back to the beginning, the last ice age, which covered all of Scotland, ended about 12,000 BC. It probably took about 2,500 years for the ice to melt. In April 25, archaeologists found a settlement on the shores of Skye that was there between the 9,000 and 9,500 BC, the start of hunters settling down in this country. This is an aerial view of the village of Dunning, which is located in the southern part of Perthshire. In 2015 and 2016, Glasgow University archaeology team did some work in two fields a mile to the east of this village, and they found that in 8000 BC, hunters had lined up 6 pits to capture animals that they would drive to it, and they found enough organic material to date that time to 10,000 years ago. At a different level within one of the fields, they found that 6,000 years ago, 4000 BC, people were ploughing fields with human-pulled and guided ploughs. Crannogs, man-made islands with buildings on them. Hundreds existed in Scotland, and they were used for long periods, from 5000 BC to 500 AD. In fact, there's records that in the 1600s there were still 2 in use. Skara Brae in Orkney was occupied in the 500 years shown here. In the Bronze and Iron Ages, between 2000 BC and 500 BC, all over Scotland there's hill forts. Where I live there's about 9 within 10 miles. These stopped around 500 BC. They were certainly all gone before the Romans came here. And then we had another defensive structure, Brochs, mainly seen in the northeast of Scotland and the north of Scotland, although there are 2 in the border areas of Scotland. So this is the past, going from hunter-gatherers, reclaiming the land from the Ice Age, and society growing and developing. Moving forward to the 9th century, Picts, who spoke a form of early Gaelic, lived in these areas. And for a few hundred years, the Scottish tribe from Ireland had been moving in to this area, causing a bit of a stramash between the two. Around 500 people from the south of England moved to the Clyde area and lived there they moved there to get away from the incursion of Angles and Saxons from Germany. And the Jutes, who were people from Denmark and the southern coasts of the Baltic, moved here to eventually create an empire called Northumbria. The Scots and the Picts eventually got together, not in battle this time, and they formed a new country with their leader Kenneth MacAlpine, and they called that country Alapa, which means land of light, although some say it means the White Country. Around 1000 AD, the name of Scotland changed again to Scotland, which simply means the land of the Scotti. As an aside, the first recorded written use of the saltire, our national flag, was 832 AD, when a group of Picts and Britons went to what is now East Lothian and fought a Northumbrian army under the General Athelstane. They lost, and at that place today, just north of Harrington, there's a village called Athelstane's Ford. As time moved on, and Alapa, before it became Scotland, was a Celtic society, a flat structure, not a hierarchical, vertical structure like lots of things today, where there was rights and obligations between the ruler, the people and the land, known as ductas. Despite King David copying England and bringing in feudalism during his reign, ductas was put within the Scottish Constitution at that time, which included rights of the people. In 1310, the clergy declared that the monarch was not the supreme authority in the land, but the people were. This was further enhanced in 1320 by the Declaration of Arbroath. Once again, clarification that the monarch was first among equal with the people, and the people were sovereign. The Equality and Justice Act made everyone equal in law, so what it was doing was actually, by legislation, doing what was actually the situation in law anyway. Likewise, the Rebellion Act, which gave the people the right to remove a monarch, in fact remove the Parliament. The growth in the people's power was enhanced in 1552, when representatives from different people in society formed themselves into the Guardians of the Realm, a formal body that allowed the people to control Parliament, not the day-to-day running, but they controlled it in the sense that if they tried in Parliament to change things which removed their rights under ductas and earlier laws, they could stop them. Eventually, this developed to the Convention of the Estates and became much more streamlined and much more legal. In 1633, there was an Act of Salvo, which created a true people's sovereignty, with the Convention of the Estates the main authority over monarch and Parliament. They could enter Parliament and protect people's rights. That didn't mean they interfered in day-to-day running. It just meant they had an overwatch and could fight and argue and get things right for the people. This eventually, through different things that happened, led to the Scottish Parliament creating the 1689 Claim of Right Act. This in effect is a written Scottish Constitution and includes all the main rights developed over 700 years of history before that date. This Act, formally and forever, within it, forbid the Parliament and the monarch from restricting and altering people's rights in laws. And it is that Act that forms the backbone of the 1707 Union Treaty with England. So Scotland was quite unique in Europe, certainly, maybe the world, in having a written constitution and a people's sovereignty and people's control at that time. England and Wales today has no such thing. They are still subjects in an archaic system of feudalism to the Crown of England and Wales. The only country today with a type of people's sovereignty is Switzerland. But Scotland's sovereignty was subdued by the fact it is formally a colony of England and has been since the Treason Act of 1708. However, it still has power via the Claim of Right, because the Claim of Right is in the treaty which the Treason Act overruled but is still integral to the Union of Great Britain. It's a pity our leaders in Scotland are either ignorant or do not wish to use this Act. Moving on from people's sovereignty. Events happened that eventually led to Scotland voluntarily giving up its sovereignty. Most people know that live in this land that since the 13th century, England has fought many wars with Scotland. There's been raiding in both directions across the border. It was a turbulent time of conquest and defeat. What actually happened was, with regard to Scotland, it was affected badly by a mini ice age that happened in Europe between 1300 and 1880, where the average temperature dropped a couple of degrees from the norm before then. Its coldest period was 1690 and 1700. Because of the farming procedures used, it caused a famine, particularly in the northeast of Scotland, where it is believed 20% of the Scottish population perished. It was against this background of suffering and famine, these doldrums, that were made worse by an earlier act by England in 1651, which forcibly removed Scotland's first colony, Nova Scotia, which is now in Canada. It restricted trade to the Americas, to France and to the Netherlands. England did not want a powerful economic Scotland north of their border. Intermittently, the Royal Navy blocked Scottish ports from 1690. In 1698, there was 2 expeditions to the Isthmus of Panama to create a colony. You couldn't choose a worse place for weather and disease. It was actually barricaded by the Royal Navy of England to stop it trading. They even told the Spanish it was there, so the Spanish got upset because it was deemed their land. It was funded by people's private money and not the Scottish Treasury. This was all part to bring down the country. It was all deliberate, and it was helped by the wealthy within Scotland working with England. It got so bad that in 1701, one of Scotland's main trades to England, most other trade went to Europe, was cattle. And there was cattle trails to the north of England, down to where Manchester is now, a bit like the Wild West with the cattle going across the deserts. That was stopped. It is in this scenario that Scottish traitors worked with England to get Scotland to sign away its sovereignty. You'll be pleased to hear that those traitors were well awarded with lots of money, lots of wealth, so much so they created the Royal Bank of Scotland with that wealth. The treaty was a sham and was seen as a huge political coup in England. There's many documents from well-known people in England at that time saying we have the Scots now, laughing at the fact they gave us 40 MPs that they said could be laughed at when they're sitting in the English Parliament. But after the treaty, in the year that followed, they quickly emptied our treasury and emptied our arsenals. Prior to this treaty in 1707, the people were promised new wealth and prosperity. It simply never happened. Then in 1708, when England realised, and I believe they knew all the time, that the promise within the treaty of a sovereign single territory called Great Britain, with a common law and a common parliament, was impossible. It's impossible because of the constitutions and the powers within each constitution between Scotland and England. If you watch my video fictitious kingdom, fraudulent state, you'll understand what I'm saying here. It could never happen. The United Kingdom, Great Britain, is simply a myth today. That's why they did the Treason Act, to make us a colony. But Scotland's constitution and Scotland's rights still exist. They are suppressed by a colonising Bill of Rights. Then in 1954 they thought they may lose Scotland as the world moved to remove colonies. So they did an Act of Parliament, and they did something called the Scottish Affairs Commission. And they then started to tell the world that Scotland was a voluntary member of the Union. This was another lie. This was actually a reimposition of a colony back onto Scotland. So what happened when Scotland was a colony? As you can see on the right here, our resources were wasted. This was a joke that came around at the time of the independence referendum. And the one on the left, it actually refers to the independence referendum again, but it could actually cover what actually happened during Scotland's colony as they removed, due to poverty and clearances, 4.6 million Scots overseas. So it was actually Scotland. We moved our people out. So after 1707 there was a long period of anger. There was riots initially and a bit of rebellion, and English soldiers patrolled Scotland. It was a time of sorrow and a time of hate, particularly to those that lost Scotland its sovereignty. They did, however, get lots of silver and gold from England, just like Judas. England left Scotland in a hiatus. It was a bad time. Trade died up. The boroughs, which were the towns, wilted. People died. Famine continued. Then in 1746, after the last Jacobite rebellion ended in defeat on Culloden Moor near Inverness, two things happened. The first was that Scotland was put under military occupation until 1810. There was over 440 forts built between 1746 and 1756. Here's a map where they were. If you go into the website shown there, you'll see lots of details. The second thing was, for 4 years the people of the Highlands particularly suffered murder, rape and death, theft of property and assets. This was well documented, and those records are actually in the the Scottish History Museum. The army was allowed to run amok. They built lots of roads at the same time to link the forts so that they could move troops. While all this was going on, after 1750 the clearances started. It wasn't just that they were looking for land. There was a hunt, particularly around Tyndrum and one or two other places, for lead. People were thrown off the land and forcibly removed. Depending on what history record you read, the figure that was kicked off the land in the clearances was somewhere between 500 and 800,000 people displaced. It is that kick of people off the land that is why Scotland today has the lowest level of indigenous land ownership in the Western world. To meet the needs of England's growing empire, using poverty and suppression and lower wages, 4,600,000 Scots, the clearances figure is included in this, were moved overseas and replaced with 2 million English people who moved in to take over the top jobs and administration within Scotland. The population dropped from around 20% of the GP landmass in 1700 down to 8.64%, which it is today. This was genocide. This was the removal of a people. This is what empires do. This is what colonies do. They subject their people to rule, and they use them, and replace their controls with their own. Part of this was in 1872, the Scotch Education Department, England's spelling, not mine. Its purpose was to eradicate Gaelic and Scots, and it nearly succeeded in Gaelic, although the attack in Scots didn't happen till the late 1950s and 60s. I have a video on that if you have a look at my list about colonial suppression of Scotland's culture. Senior public posts, police, civil service, they're all filled in by English people or people with strong union followers, part of the elite within our country. This applies to senior posts in universities also. In universities across Western Europe, about 40 to 45% of the senior posts are from people in that country. In Scotland, that figure is somewhere between 5 and 9%, and in some subjects, 0. Our constitution and land, however, are still there, but inactive, replaced by a foreign, non-written constitution. Our parliament and our land is controlled by the laws of England because we are suppressed as a colony. After World War II, as I mentioned earlier, the UN started to decolonise. England got worried that Scotland might be considered a colony, so they created this, the Scottish Affairs Commission, which actually said that Scotland entered the Union voluntarily. They never mentioned the 1708 Act. This is where the myth so many believe started today. The myth did not exist before then, and the English state made sure that everybody in the world knew and believed this. Even the people in our country today believe this, but it's not true. So in 1954, for the second time, the English crown was again put over Scotland as in 1708, which reaffirmed our colonial status for the second time. It's no wonder then that as time moved on through the last century up to now, that many people, particularly those Scots-born who live in Scotland, want out. They want their own country back again. They want their own constitution, their own laws, and the laws of a foreign power removed. Between 1910 and 1915, the Labour Party tried to get votes talking about Scottish and Welsh Home Rule. This was a cynical ploy for votes. Likewise in 1930. However, after an upsurge of demand for a parliament, the Labour Party held a referendum in 1979 for a Scottish Parliament. The vote was yes, but it did not happen as MPs in London changed the rules the week before. They ignored the popular vote. People were angry at this turn of events. This meant that in 1980 to 89 there was a campaign to get a Scottish Assembly. This changed in time to the Scottish Constitutional Convention, and the first thing the Scottish Constitutional Convention did was reaffirm the 1689 Claim of Right Act, renamed by them for their purpose the 1989 Act, although it wasn't actually an act. In 11th September 1997, a referendum for the Scottish Parliament did indeed take place, and the Parliament began in July the 1st, 1999. They needed a new building to start its deliberations, and you can see the photographs here of our Parliament. This Parliament, with increased Scottish National Party control, managed to get a referendum for Scottish independence on the 18th of September 2014. As you can see for the figures, the no side, the side that says Stay with England, won. So we're still part of the colony of England. There'll be a special video I'm doing about all the bad things that happened during this vote. It was not a fair vote, it was not a balanced vote, but it was a vote nevertheless, and it had the wrong franchise. Before the vote in 2014, the trouble was Scottish politicians had poor knowledge of the evidence. The Scottish currency case they had was poor. It was attacked in the media. All the media was against it, but the main thrust and the broken 1,000 plus promises that were made all emphasised that quite unique in the whole world, the people that live on this land called Scotland were too poor, too wee, too stupid to run themselves without the happy face of England, of the Union working together. That was the message. There was a mistake in the franchise. In effect, they used a Scottish county council franchise, and they ignored the fact that this was a constitutional vote. They should have used a UN franchise for just such things. But the campaign, nevertheless, on the yes side was a jolly affair with hard work in the streets. Then we had the vow. The vow happened the day before the vote, which went against British voting practice, and it promised Devo Max a type of super devolved parliament. And then the following day, against the laws of the treaty, they wanted to bring in English votes for English laws only at Westminster. But it's not an English parliament, it's a UK parliament, and they had no right to do this. This actually broke the Treaty of Union. The Smith Commission was to give us more powers, the promised vow. It never happened. We got 2 or 3 extra small powers in 2016. Another lie covered up. In 3 areas of Scotland, there was worry and notice that many of the postal votes in that, the numbers didn't add up, but it was never investigated. So the day after the vote, people were pretty glum, very depressed. But in 2015, that depression of 2014 in the UK general election meant that the Scottish National Party won 56 of the 59 seats, and they also had more than 50% of the total electorate, not those that voted, the total electorate. And they did nothing. Under the Claim of Right Act, that party, with that vote, could have got us our independence and caused at that time a major constitutional crisis. They had 2 other elections with the UK where they could have done the same thing. They did not. And that is one of the reasons the SNP in 2024 in the Westminster vote got only 8 seats. They had let the people down. Despite no political progress towards independence, the Yes movement has been reorganised and it's in good shape for a campaign. There's just no faith that politicians can deliver it. Most of us think that anyway. In the period from May 24 to April 25, there were 6 opinion polls putting yes support between 52 and 56%. That's self-evident. That view, by the way, is Glen Etty from the west coast of Scotland. So progress was made in a different way. In July 2022, a pro-independence group called Salvo was created. Its purpose was to get Scotland's liberation using legal means via laws that already exist, signed by the UK. After many man-years of effort, they submitted proof to the UN Decolonisation Committee that Scotland is a colony of England on the 7th of March 2025. If successful, Scotland's people will get a UN-administered referendum. So I'm going to end on one or two points that I've covered in this video with a talk on a possible future, a better future. Politically, Scotland had a functioning popular sovereignty many centuries ago, well ahead of all other countries then and now. After bad weather, deceit, oppression and betrayal, Scotland signed a poor Union treaty with its large neighbour in 1707. That treaty was to create a single territory, a single power, but it never happened because the constitutions of the two countries, the power of the monarch, could not allow it to happen, and it did not, and it has not. That is why Great Britain is today a fictional kingdom and a fraudulent state. You should watch my video with that exact name. That is why in 1708 our neighbour made us a colony, which they reconfirmed in 1954 under the guise of telling the world we were a voluntary union. In actual fact, they just made us a colony twice. But in 2025, a group called Salvo put something towards the United Nations. So we entered a process that may, if we are lucky, give us and our children hope. Hope for a free and better future for this our beautiful land. A land where the people are once again sovereign. A land where our ancient powers are brought up to date and reintroduced so that the people control our country, and not the people that call themselves politicians, nor the elite, but the people. That's the end of my video. Thank you. So before I go on, here's my videos that I've created. You can see the real history videos and Yes Group videos. These are older. And I have a YouTube channel. If you go into YouTube at Robert Anderson 9116, you'll see access to all these videos. I plan to do these ones during 2025. The one arrowed here should be quite a short video, but it's about the betrayal of 1708 and 1954, which I allude to here, just to give a bit more explanation. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please have a look at my channel. Thank you.